Welcome to Geopolitics in Conflict show, where Ross, our viewers, been asking for
by name. They've been asking.
That's correct.
And the surprise today is we've got one of those people.
Well, we were lucky that this guest agreed to come on platform, given his busy schedule and so forth. We are so grateful. How about if you introduce our guest, Ross, so our viewers have an idea?
Mr. Hussein Askary is the Information Section Manager at the Belt and Road Institute of Sweden. Hussein is a global speaker and author. He appeared on many forums and panels around the world. Among his latest publications is Extending the New Silk Road to West Africa and Asia, a vision of the economic renaissance. We are delighted to have you with us today.
Yeah, good to have you here on the show, Hussein.
Thank you, David and Ross. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to be with you. I am one of the subscribers to your channel on YouTube, so I'm learning a lot.
Yeah. So that means we're getting closer to 70 million.
That's right.
Subscribers.
Yeah, you deserve to have 70 million.
Well, thank you so much, Hussein. We're working towards it.
You know, our motto is stay informed, and we really attempt to give people straight information and let them invite them to make up their own minds.
Well, this is why today we have Hussein here. He's gonna talk to us. I mean, his perspective. Our viewers gonna be in for a treat regarding what he has to say about a very, very interesting, dynamic, and geo-economic topic. And this one has to do with none other than
the Belt and Road Initiative.
Would
you give us an overview of what this is really all about?
Okay, well, formally, the Belt and Road Initiative was announced by President Xi Jinping of China. First, he was in Kazakhstan, in Astana, the former capital. It's called Nur Sultan now, on September 2013, where he announced the launching of the initiative for the economic belt of the new Silk Road. Then a month later, in October, he was in Indonesia to announce the launching of the 21st century maritime Silk Road, which is the seafaring. This is one is in the sea and one is on land. So the one on land is called the belt, economic belt of the new Silk Road, and the other one is called the maritime Silk Route. First, it was called One Belt, One Road in Chinese literature, but then they realized that it doesn't make sense because there are many roads involved. So they did it, the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, since it was launched, there have been two major summits, forums on that in 2017 and 2019. 140 nations have formally joined it by signing a memorandum of understanding with China, the originator of the initiative. There are also 30 international organizations, like UN organizations, the World Health Organization. There's a Health Silk Road also. So these also have become members in the Belt and Road Initiative. So since then, everything China does around the world are also infrastructure projects, which is it's generally an infrastructure building project. It has other aspects, as I said, it has healthcare aspect. There's a digital Silk Road. There's a space Silk Road. But all these things became, and it also became part of the Chinese constitution. That this became an item in the Chinese constitution, so that's part of the structure of this. But it is not simply a Chinese. They say it's an initiative. Everybody is welcome. And each nation, as a sovereign, independent nation, signs a specific memorandum of understanding with China. It's not a generalized form where everybody is like a treaty, everybody signs the same paper.
Yeah.
With each country, China signs a different kind of memorandum of understanding, depending on the situation of that country's relation to China, that country's geographical location, its economic status, and so on and so forth. So it's a very flexible initiative. It's not a project, it's not one project. So in that sense, it has become very open to other nations.
Yeah.
So
that this, Hussein, while I'm thinking about it, that this memo that China signs with other countries, does it have to do with the economic status of the country? In other words, if you have a rich country, economically speaking, versus one that is moderate, is it the same form or is it a different memo for this country versus that one?
No, it's just a different form, but also it addresses that country's specific conditions, what kind of relation it has with China. For example, the Italian memorandum of understanding is different than the one with Iraq, my native country, for example. The Iraqi memorandum of understanding has a lot to do with building infrastructure in Iraq because it is war ravaged. It has a lot to do with investments in oil and gas. That's not included in the Italian, for example. So all of them start with the idea that they will work jointly. China and this country will work jointly to build the Belt and Road. That's always the same pattern in the beginning. But then the details are different. What we will work together on differs from one country to the other.
Now, how did you come into becoming the information for the section of the BRI in Sweden? If you can just provide our viewers a brief snapshot of how it's all started for you.
Yeah, I will first show you the different corridors of the Belt and Road.
That's great.
And then I will tell you the background to how I got my knowledge of this idea, but also why we started the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden. So I'm ready to share with you a video.
Great.
It's an animation which I asked a friend who's an artist to produce, and it shows the different corridors of the Belt and Road.
That will be very interesting for our viewers to see.
Here we go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. The first corridor is the China, Mongolia, Russia corridor. The second corridor is the China-Pakistan. It goes from Western China to Pakistan. It's called the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. And it's the flagship of the other one is the China, Indo-China corridor. It involves China, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and Thailand. And we also have the China, Myanmar, Bangladesh, India corridor. India has not developed into a member into this yet. There is also the Iron Silk Road, which is the traditional Silk Road, goes from China to Central Asia, Iran, and Turkey. And then we have the Eurasian corridor, which goes from China, Kazakhstan, Russia, Belarus, and then into different directions in Western Europe. Wow. And we have the maritime Silk Road, which goes from southern China through the Indian Ocean to East Africa, the Gulf, the Suez Canal, and to Europe. So these are the formal lines of the general. Now, some people say the Belt and Road is vague. Anyway, so the thing is, the criticism usually is that the Belt and Road is a vague thing. There are no maps. There is no information. But there is enough information for people who want to find it. I did that. It takes some homework, but you can find it. China has something called the Belt and Road Portal. It's part of what we can say an information ministry in China. And they have a special portal with all the information about the Belt and Road. They have also a document. Okay, China doesn't want to make maps of the Belt and Road officially because some countries might feel sidestepped. And if you do a map which includes all the countries in the world, that some countries will say, well, we are not in the Belt and Road.
Right.
So why are you including us? So they avoid making maps, but there are documents which tells you what the Belt and Road is. There's a document which was produced in 2015 because there was a lot of criticism that there's no information. It's called the Vision and idea of building the Belt and Road. It was published by the Reform and Development Committee of China. And it's a detailed idea on every aspect of why China wants to have launched this initiative. But it also includes these corridors and also some political and other principles. There are 5 principles that political connectivity, political cooperation, financial cooperation, unhindered trade, people-to-people dialogue, and so on and so forth. But one of the most important things is that China does not have a political demands, attached to working with these countries. It does not involve in any discussion about that specific country's political, social, cultural, and strategic interests. They just want to do cooperation on certain projects and trade. So there is enough information on the Belt and Road available for people. That's why one of the reasons we started the Belt and Road Institute here in Sweden is that there is very little information in the media here about it. Mostly, almost all of it is negative. It's anti-China, but also there is, there's a lot of disinformation. There are things said about the Belt and Road Initiative and China that are completely incorrect, which we can discuss. So therefore, we wanted to start this because we thought, it included business people, think tankers. I come from a different think tank. It's called the Schiller Institute, which I will describe now. Started this work on the New Silk Road since the 1990s. And we have been developing that idea for many years. But we told people here in Sweden that we are missing a train. It's a very important project. It's going to continue. It's unstoppable, but it's beneficial to join it. And therefore, we wanted to provide this information both to policymakers and business people and others so they can make a correct judgment, not based on biased media reporting. This is, and there's an irony in this whole thing. This whole idea, not China's idea, but my work with the Belt and Road, not the Belt and Road, with the New Silk Road concept, which is called the Eurasian land bridge. Actually, this started from a U.S. economist who's now since 2019 deceased, Mr. Lyndon LaRouche, which I worked with, and the Schiller Institute worked with. This is the magazine he established. This is the first map I know of this concept. It's from 1992. It's an American magazine.
Wow.
And Lyndon LaRouche was an American economist, but he was a universal thinker at the same time. So the background is actually, if you go back to this, if you read through this material, you will find out that, for example, an inspiration was the work of Abraham Lincoln's people with the Transcontinental Railway. That was a continental land bridge, which changed a lot in U.S. History. Then in 1996, after I joined the Schiller Institute in 1994-95, then in 1996, there was an international conference in Beijing organized by the Chinese government in which they announced that the New Silk Road will be their strategy for the future. It was not developed, but it was an announcement. So at the time, the chairwoman of the Schiller Institute, Mrs. Helga Zepp-LaRouche, when she came back from that conference, she was actually invited to that conference, and she spoke there. When she came back, we put together this report, the Eurasian Land Bridge, New Silk Road Locomotive for Worldwide Economic Development. That was published in 1997. I wrote, together with the main author, the chapter on what's called the Middle East, West Asia. And this is the oldest well-defined map of the Eurasian land bridge, or the New Silk Road, which we then extended into Africa. And I did a lot of work on this region. I like to call it West Asia and Africa, not Middle East. The Middle East is a misleading term. So we did that. Our concept of this, or the LaRouche's concept, is that these will not be trade routes. These would be development corridors. And I think,
wow. Yeah, nice.
So the Chinese, I think the president personally understands this concept very well. That's why he called it the economic belt of the New Silk Road. He did not call it the trade route of the New Silk Road. He said economic because it implies building infrastructure among nations and in the whole continent. This is development corridor, which should be 100 to 150 kilometers wide. And it includes water canals, rivers, railways, highways, oil and gas pipeline, electricity pipelines, because you want to bring infrastructure to regions that mostly landlocked, where you have natural and human resources, but you don't have the means to use them. So without the infrastructure, you cannot utilize and develop these regions. So that was the concept. If you look at the American Transcontinental Railway, what it did along that railway, it brought huge numbers of population and agriculture, and new cities were built all around it. As the Chinese say, if you want to get rich, build a road.
Wow.
That's a sound scientific and economic concept.
Yeah.
Because everywhere you build a road, things will grow around it. And if you bring electricity, more things will grow. If you bring water, more things will grow. So this is a scientific concept. Then we developed this concept of the world land bridge. This is from the Schiller Institute. This is not from the Chinese. The world land bridge is a concept which is well defined. I will show you some reports that you can actually connect the whole world with railways and other infrastructure, including the Americas. So this is a great idea, which we call more geoeconomics. Geopolitics wants to split the world, but geoeconomics can unite the world. And inside this world land bridge, we have identified the Belt and Road corridors, these 7 corridors. So this is not a Chinese, simply a Chinese. This could become a global thing, which the United States, the Americas can participate in. There's actually a project which was supported by the governor of Alaska to connect Alaska with Russia, with Siberia, with a bridge or tunnel. The Chinese support that idea. The Japanese support that idea. And so that's where, so since then, we have done hundreds of conferences. This is the first report I showed you. And these are thick things. These are very big studies. And then when the Chinese announced the Belt and Road,
that one, Hussein, that one you just pointed at, is that a research, the result of a research paper? Or was it just the study?
This is a collection of articles and speeches.
Okay.
But also a general outline, the principles upon which, economic principles, upon which this idea should be built. And then when the Chinese announced the Belt and Road
in 2013.
In 2014, we published this study, which is called The New Silk Road Becomes the World Land Bridge. It's almost 400 pages.
Okay.
I translated it into Arabic.
Wow, it is in Arabic. Wow, that's interesting.
It was translated into Chinese. I don't have the Chinese copy by a Chinese university. It's translated to French and German and Spanish. Then 2 years ago, we published, this is the French, this is the volume 2 of the World Land Bridge, and it's also even thicker.
Wow. And that one has all the updated data, all the updated information regarding the project. Perfect. Interesting.
And I myself took the initiative with some colleagues you mentioned this, the new extending the new Silk Road to West Asia and Africa. West Asia, which is the Middle East, and Africa. So we have a general outline of what China is involved in, but also some of the disinformation. We try to explain it, and also future projects. We have had in the Schiller Institute for decades ideas for the development of Africa with infrastructure. The inspiration comes also from America, from President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Because during World War II, he had big quarrels with Churchill. When they met in Casablanca, there's a very interesting book, which very few Americans know about it. It's written by his son, Elliot Roosevelt. It's called As He Saw It. And he tells about when he was an Air Force officer, he was with his father certain times, and he was in some of these private meetings with world leaders. So in Casablanca, there was a big quarrel between Roosevelt and Churchill. And Roosevelt told him because that after this war, we were not going to support the British Empire, the French Empire, all these empires will be finished. We will have a new world order. Africa will develop. we will develop Africa as we develop the United States with the New Deal, with infrastructure, healthcare, education. And he told Churchill, look, you suck the blood of Africans, but what do you get? You get pennies. But if you develop Africa, you will get much, much more.
Yes.
But Africa should be independent. So Roosevelt had plans for every part of the planet, including developing China's infrastructure. He sent his officers, his people. But unfortunately, after Roosevelt died, this whole idea disappeared. And the Cold War was launched by Harry Truman and Churchill personally. And since then, we didn't have any such great American involvement in the world, other than, we have involvement, but it's a terrible involvement in the world. But the United States does not build infrastructure. So this is the background. So I have worked for like 20 years with the Schiller Institute and LaRouche, and discussing with experts, economists, engineers, companies, all kinds of people, to how we can develop this concept more and more. And therefore, we became the main source of information for people who want to have objective, including people in China who want to really understand how this project will evolve and what are the principles. So I don't claim that it was the Chinese took our idea, but I see a lot of what China is doing is perfectly in harmony with what we have proposed. Our idea from the beginning is that Europe should launch this project in the 90s and 2000s to develop Eastern Europe and Russia with infrastructure projects, because you have in the what called the productive triangle between Vienna, Paris, and Berlin. You had the world's greatest concentration of technology in that triangle. That was in the 90s. Now that triangle has moved to China.
Yeah,
but Europe strike me as toothless. Europe cannot make a decision on its own without that's a topic for another time.
So anyway, that's the background and of my understanding of the Belt and Road, and that's what I can contribute to people to understand why this is the Belt and Road is important.
One of the things that President Xi frequently talks about is the Belt and Road Initiative, and he talks about it with a humanitarian tone to it. Like he wants us to be, we respect the culture, we respect the government, we respect the rights of the people, their traditions, and so on. And we're looking for a win-win scenario. Would you comment on that?
Yes, I mean the Chinese, they do have their own philosophy. The problem is that when people listen to President Xi Jinping, they think it's like listening to any other leader in the West. When he makes a speech, he must say certain things so it sounds good. But they really believe in these things. This is part of their culture. This is part of the political philosophy of the Chinese themselves. And therefore, we have all these misunderstandings. People think that when he says we want win-win, we don't want to be involved in other countries, everybody says, well, that's a trick.
Yeah.
Because we are used to politicians saying something and doing something different.
True enough. Very true. Yes.
So, but the Chinese philosophy, which is Confucian more than communist, believes in this idea of harmony among nations, harmony within the family, harmony within the community, because what is beneficial for your neighbor is beneficial for you. By the way, this is a Christian idea too.
Yeah,
you're right.
If you look at the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, which ended the bloody 100 Years' War and 30 Years' War, it says that every party should then work for the benefit of the other and should not interfere in their internal affairs. This became part of the UN Charter. So if your neighbor's house is burning, you cannot be safe. So it's better if your neighbor is safe and have a good living.
Absolutely right.
Then that's what Roosevelt told Churchill. He said, if the Africans become rich, you will benefit. But if you keep sucking their blood, they will die and you will not become rich. Your empire will end at some point. So, but the Chinese do believe in what they say. And this is one of the big misunderstandings. We have a problem in psychology. It's called projection.
Yes.
People project over China their own misconceptions and misdeeds, saying China, if China becomes powerful, it will take over the world, like the British Empire did, or the United States have done, and so on. But that's a problem of projection. I remember one of the Chinese experts, when they asked him, how can we trust that China does not take over the world and invade countries if you become very powerful? And he said, the answer is simple. We are not stupid. Said, we are not going to waste.
Wow.
Said, we are not going to waste our lives and fortunes to go and destroy other countries. Look what has just happened in Afghanistan. The United States spent $2 trillion in Afghanistan and thousands of people killed. For what? Afghans are hungry today. There's no electricity in Afghanistan. You know where Afghanistan get 80% of the electricity from neighboring countries, including Iran, which is under US sanctions.
Wow.
Of course.
Iran also exports electricity and gas to Iraq, an oil-rich country which was under US control. So
one of the ways we've
people project what the US has done, that they say China will do the same. And that's not true, because you don't really understand
the Chinese history, and that is not their history.
Exactly.
They could have gone to Africa and other places, but they respected, brought back dignitaries, said, let's get along and let's learn to know each other.
Yeah.
And a very solid history in China.
True. Very few people hear the Chinese national anthem, but they don't look at the translation of what it says.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what it says? Jinla, hurry up. Let's build the wall. The enemy is coming.
Yes.
That's the
mindset, maybe.
That's the mindset but of course now China, they have more trust in other people because they are doing good work with other people. They are building and helping their neighbors, so they are not scared anymore of their neighbors. But there is a big threat coming from the West, with military threat coming to them. So the Chinese, that's one big problem. I mean, I'm not the China expert, to be honest with you. Many people call themselves China experts, but they are not, because they look at China from outside. If you want to understand China, you have to understand China from the inside. And therefore, I'm not a China expert, but I see what the Chinese do. Confucius says, pay attention to what they say, but observe what they do. I hear what the Chinese say, but what is more important for me is I'm looking at what they are doing.
Yes.
Exactly.
And this should apply to everybody.
Well, good. So now the question becomes, based on what you just said, it becomes like, why there is this opposition in the West to China's BRI?
Well, there are different but connected reasons. Because on the surface, on the superficial side, you have this fear of communism, like especially in the United States. China is a communist country which wants to take over the world and make everybody a communist. That's a big scare. It's used for psychological warfare. There is also a certain level of xenophobia, that China is an Asian culture and they're becoming powerful. We don't know what they're going to do next step, and so on and so forth. But the biggest problem is this British geopolitical mindset, which stems actually from the Hobbesian philosophy, that humans and societies is a war of everyone against everyone. The only reason we have law is to have everybody under control. Otherwise, people will just slaughter each other. And that there are no permanent friends, there are only permanent interests and all that kind of stuff. And geopolitics, from its inception, was based on this idea that you have to control and manipulate certain areas in the world so you can undermine your competitors, that we are in a competition with other powers. But this is from the colonial period, because you had different colonial powers, like the British, the French, the Dutch, the Russians, and so on. You had alliances and counter alliances. But you will organize world affairs on the basis of these alliances as if you are in a war, a competition. Sometimes this competition develops into a war, that you are in a war and you have to prepare your position is like a chessboard, Brzezinski's grand chessboard and all these things. And Henry Kissinger, this whole idea of using Islam against Russia and China it started with Brzezinski, but it comes from Bernard Lewis, a British geopolitical thinker. By his idea was you have to build a belt of unrest on the southern border of the Soviet Union. That's how you control them. That's why we got the Afghan war. But this, in my mind, this is not a humanist philosophy. The humanist philosophy is this idea, which I said also Christian, this idea of Westphalian peace. What is good for you is good for me. That's what should replace that idea. So the opposition to China comes from this fear, but also this philosophy that we are in a competition, in a permanent war of all against all. And then you have media and think tanks are serving the people in power.
Right.
Now we have people talk about the military-industrial complex, but now you have the think tanks and media and academics serving the military-industrial complex by giving them the foundations upon which they will launch these wars and this competition. So the think tanks and the media are not doing a good job by telling the truth. They are telling the policymakers what they would like to hear.
Exactly.
So that's one of the big problems we have. That's one of the reasons we have our institute.
And one of the things we keep hearing about from the media is debt trap.
Exactly.
Would you care to talk about that?
Yes, sure. I have written a lot about this myself, but I also studied many other very respected researchers on this question. The term debt trap was launched by some people in India who were upset with the Sri Lanka working with China and around the port of Hambantota specifically, which now everybody is talking about. But the real big campaign started in May 2018 in the United States, when the state secretary, Rex Tillerson, I think he was at the time, the U.S. State Department they commissioned two scholars, so-called scholars, students at the Belfer Center and the Kennedy School in Harvard University. They commissioned them. They told them, they made a contract, like, look, we want you to write a report on China's financing of these projects. Do they imply a debt trap to entrap those nations in order to control them as strategic assets? So these two people, if you allow me to explain some of it, I mean, the report is called Debt Book Diplomacy. China's strategic leveraging of its newfound economic influence and the consequences for U.S. foreign policy. The Belfer Center, Kennedy School, Harvard. The report was written by two students at the time, Sam Parker and Gabriela Shevitz. So when they finished the report, which was commissioned by the State Department to say only negative things about China, they delivered the report back to the State Department. Then the State Department, on the 15th or 16th of May 2018, they convened a press conference to release that report, which they paid for or commissioned. It was not an academic study. And they gave copies to every media in the world. So if you look at Debt Book Diplomacy or Debt Trap, when you Google it, almost everything starts in May 2018. And the report was spread all over the planet, and people started, quoting it. Now, the kernel of the report says, for Debt Book West, that's west of China, Pakistan, Djibouti, Myanmar, and Sri Lanka are identified as priority concerns. Countries that have already ceded either key port or military base to China are continuing to sink deeper into its debt trap, and where U.S. interests are at stake, end of quote. So Mr. Sam Parker, he is not an economist. He's not a financial expert. What was he doing before he went to study at the Kennedy School? He was the at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security as a special assistant to the Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs. Previously, he worked at the Queens District Attorney's Office's Special Victims Bureau and assisted with message development for the It's On Us campaign against campus sexual assault as a White House intern. At Colby, his previous school, his senior thesis predicted and analyzed how demographic change over the next 30 years will affect the electoral map. That's his expertise, sexual assault in universities. So he was that. Mrs. Gabriela Shevitz, his partner in the report, after receiving her BA from Northwestern Middle School of Journalism, Shevitz served as a research assistant for the project on the Middle East peace process at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Previously, she spent a year at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee as legislative intern covering the Middle East and was an intern with the Department of Defense working for U.S. security policy towards the Gulf states. So those two people had nothing to do with economics or finance to be able. So the whole report is about geopolitics. And then they say, we will use the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka as the template. That's what they say. It should be made the template. So everybody in the world should focus on the port of Hambantota as the example. And that's the only example they could offer of a port which was leased to China to solve any financial problem. Now, if we look at the reality, more respected reports, did I end sharing? Yes. I didn't share, no, I was looking only on my text. I wrote an article when I saw this thing spreading in 2018. I called it the debt trap hoax. And I took examples, not from Sri Lanka, but I took Pakistan because I didn't have enough information on Pakistan, but Pakistan was included in this report. What I discovered after looking at Pakistan's debt problems is that it started long before the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor was started. And 90% at the time in 2018, 90% of Pakistan's debt was to Western interests. The IMF, World Bank, the Paris Club, and so on and so forth. And actually, the IMF, to give them a $12 billion package that year, they ordered the Pakistani government to stop financing key infrastructure projects.
Wow. Interesting.
So they can get support.
Yeah.
But in every case you look where this is mentioned, I will come back to Sri Lanka and the Hambantota port. But in every case, in Africa, everywhere, all these indebted nations, they're indebted because of debt traps set for them by Western powers, not by China. So when China comes to a country, the criticism against China, they say, these things are not financially sustainable because these countries are in deep debt. So how could they finance the credit you are issuing for building these projects? And the Chinese say, well, we don't care because we know from our own experience, if you don't build infrastructure and industry, you cannot pay back your debt, which is a sound way to do things. You know, you cannot pay back your debt because what the big fallacy in this thing is that the infrastructure which is being built is not treated as an asset, it's treated as a liability. There's a big difference.
Yes, very big.
If you build a port, that's an asset. If you build a railway, that's an asset. In Western literature, it's treated as a liability. It's a burden. But what does a port and railway and industries do? They increase the productivity of that country and making it financially able to do business and pay back their debt. This is what happened in Sri Lanka. China helped Sri Lanka with that leasing of the port. They didn't want to lease the port. It was the proposal come from the Sri Lankan government. The Sri Lankan government, since the end of the civil war, was borrowing money from international bond markets. They were issuing bonds bought by European and American finances to finance part of their reconstruction, but also they had huge social problems. So that debt became mature in 2016, 2017, and the Sri Lankan government could not get enough resources to pay back the debt. So they proposed to China to get the equivalent of 1.1 billion in their credit for the port in cash, so they can pay the debt to the Western institutions. So
Wow.
actually, and this is documented in a very good study by Dr. Deborah Brautigam from the Advanced Asian Studies School of Advanced Asian Studies at the Johns Hopkins University. You can go and check it for yourself. It's called the China-Africa Project also. Dr. Deborah Brautigam is a very respected scholar, and I have read a couple of her books, actually. And she went through thousands of documents pertaining to this Sri Lankan port. And her conclusion was that this was a bailout by China of the Sri Lankan government because they were in deep trouble. And China helped Sri Lanka pay back its debt to other countries, not to China. And the Chatham House in England also, which is no friend of China, they had also a very interesting study recently. It's called Debunking the Debt Trap Myth. So this was a myth. And if you go and check into every country where they say China is putting people in debt trap, that country is already in a debt trap, but it was created by other forces in the West, not by China.
Yeah. But there is also that argument that before China agreed to something with those countries understand what are they getting into. So in other words, China doesn't force them to enter into an agreement.
No.
It's their choice. So they're like big boys. They know what they're doing.
Yeah. And they are, yeah.
So, yeah, it's like when we go and get a loan somewhere, we know what the consequences if we don't pay it back.
Exactly.
So it's on us to decide whether we want a loan or not.
Yeah, but China, there's nowhere in these agreements. I've read contracts China did with Yemen, for example, before the war to build a port in Aden.
Yes.
There is nothing that if you don't pay back the debt, we will take the port from you. There is nothing like this. I would like to there was a funny situation last year I was involved in Lebanon. Because Lebanon was in a deep financial and economic crisis before the explosion of the port in Beirut. And I was writing because the Lebanese government was in very deep discussions with Chinese government and companies to start a number of very big infrastructure projects, port in Tripoli, railways, water, power systems that will lift Lebanon out of its misery, because Lebanon has no productive economy. So while they were discussing this, the United States ambassador to Lebanon broke all protocol and started issuing statements attacking China. Ooh. And then the Trump administration sent the Mr. David Schenker to the region to push them to stop dealing with China. So one of the things he said, which prompted, it was a good opportunity for me to respond to him. He said, "Look what has happened in Djibouti. They are in big trouble because the Chinese are loaning them money to build infrastructure." So I said, well, this is good. I didn't look at Djibouti really that deeply, but Djibouti became very important because of the port and railway to Ethiopia, which is 100 million people in Ethiopia who need that railway, which and of course China has played a big role in developing Ethiopia's infrastructure, but it's landlocked. So they built this port and developed other ports. But this gave me an opportunity to look at Djibouti. So I looked at in almost all the things I write, and I don't use Chinese sources unless it comes to specific things, but I use Western sources. So I went to the World Bank and I looked for Djibouti. So what I found, it says in the World Bank has an annual economic update in April 2019, and it states, quote, "The medium-term economic outlook is positive as the government's strategy of positioning the country as a regional trade, logistics, and digital hub gains traction. GDP growth is expected to reach 7% in 2019 before accelerating to 8% in 2020 and 2023. Growth will be supported by exports of transportation, logistics, and telecommunications services as the country harvests dividends from its ambitious investment program. End of quote. Another World Bank report, which is titled Djibouti Country Overview, published in October 2019, states, quote, Djibouti's US 2 billion city-state economy, that's the GDP, is driven by a state-of-the-art port complex, among the most sophisticated in the world. Trade through the port is expected to grow rapidly in parallel with the expanding economy of its largest neighbor and main trading partner, Ethiopia. Thanks to massive public debt-financed investments in infrastructure, Djibouti has seen rapid, sustained growth in recent years, with per capita GDP growing at more than 3%, so on and so forth. And who financed these projects in Djibouti and Ethiopia? A report by the US Congressional Research Service, I looked at, it says in September 2019, this is US Congress Research Service. It's the title of the report is China's Engagement in Djibouti. But you can read there, it says, quote, Djibouti is pursuing an ambitious agenda to transform itself into a commercial trade hub of the Horn of Africa region. This effort is being financed largely by the People's Republic of China, which is playing a growing role in the tiny country. China's engagements is multifaceted, ranging from major infrastructure investments to the establishment of its first overseas military base in the country. China considers Djibouti part of its Belt and Road Initiative. In late 2017, the two countries declared that they had established a strategic partnership. End of quote. Now, according to the same U.S. Congressional Research Service publication, it says, quote, China reportedly has provided nearly 1.5 billion in financing for major infrastructure projects in Djibouti since 2000. Among the projects are, of course, these ports and 3.5 billion free trade zone, and so on and so forth. So everything the congressional report is saying is actually positive. That Djibouti, which Mr. David Shanker was warning people in Lebanon, that this is a horrible example of what China can do to you. Your economy can start growing. So
that's the contradictions usually coming out of Congress, anyway.
Yeah. Also, you have to do the homework to scratch beyond the surface of the headlines and these statements. So you go and read real reports about economics, and you find the truth.
Exactly.
So, how successful do you think the Belt and Road Initiative is today? Because we know it is, what is it? It's a 2049.
Yes, 2049. The end of the project.
End of the project. How would you say it's today? I mean, we've had a lot of things happen in the world in the last year or two.
Yes, there was a big. With the COVID-19 pandemic, many things were affected. And there were nations who were supposed to join the Belt and Road. Presidents were supposed to travel to China and become members. Argentina was one of them, but also there was unrest in Argentina. So there was a general, cooling on that front. But the Chinese launched the Health Silk Road already in April 2020. So they were sending massive amounts of medical equipment, medicines, including to the United States. US imports from China increased in 2020. It's right. The China virus. China increased its exports to the United States in 2020. So anyway, but even the critics of the Belt and Road say this is unstoppable. What we can do, like here in Sweden, is we can stop Sweden from joining it. Or we can stop Denmark from joining it, and so on. So they say it's unstoppable. And more nations will join it and will benefit from that. And when the Chinese say in 2025, we will do this made in China, 2030, we will do this, they will do it. be sure they do what they say. 2049, as you said, the Belt and Road would have
Being
reached
completed.
maturity, so to speak, and become a mature global thing. I mean, many things could happen before that. Africa's development is going to launch. Africa will be the world's biggest workshop.
Yeah.
If you have infrastructure in Africa and then you have 1.3 billion people, mostly young people, you imagine what you can do with that continent's human and natural resources if you have the infrastructure. By 2050, we will have 3 billion Africans.
Wow, interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
So the Chinese are looking forward and say, this is like Roosevelt did, said, this is the future. Africa is the future. If we develop Africa, it will be a gold mine for everybody.
Yeah.
By the way, Hussein, where does the Swedish government stand on all this? In other words, is the Swedish government on board with the BRI, or they are completely opposing?
No, they are opposed to it because we have many think tanks here and the media. They are completely mobilized against the Belt and Road and against China itself.
Okay.
And therefore, they don't differentiate between the Belt and Road and China.
Yeah. So
but
there's
Sweden, China is a very important trade partner with Sweden. We have massive projects. I mean, China saved Volvo.
I drive Volvo, by the way.
Okay, great.
I'm a Volvo
great
guy.
car. But the Chinese, Geely, took over Volvo, and they made it one of the best cars in China. It's selling a lot. And we have like 25,000 people in Sweden are employed because in Chinese-owned companies. I mean, we have many industries. We have the fantastic cooperation with China on biotech. We have Ericsson, the telecom giant. Its biggest market is China. They even threatened the Swedish government, say, if you stop, because the Swedish government decided to rule out Huawei from the 5G network building. But you cannot have, I mean, I listened to one of your discussions. You say they have the equipment. You cannot have 5G without Chinese involvement. They have the equipment.
Yeah.
So anyway, Ericsson threatened the government, said, look, if you don't stop this, we might have to move to China, because that's where our market.
I bet that got their attention.
So we have a schizophrenic situation. We'd like to do business with China and export a lot of things to China, but we don't like the Chinese government. We don't like the Belt and Road.
I see.
So that's the official Swedish policy.
Okay.
If you were going to give our viewers a concise statement of what you think the Belt and Road Initiative really has to offer the world, what would you say it is?
I think it's a new paradigm in international relations since World War II. It's a new paradigm because it has both, it changes this philosophy of this war mentality, competition, and makes nations respect each other, work together. But it's also a revolution in economics.
Yeah.
I mean, because this idea of the development corridor, this idea of developing new technologies, lifting people out of poverty, these things can finally happen now. Yeah. And the Chinese have proven it at home. I mean, the Belt and Road wouldn't be possible without what the Chinese did at home.
Yeah.
Moving from a poor country, much poorer than many African countries in the 60s and 70s, into number 2 and maybe number 1, by applying special credit, issuing credits and their financial resources to infrastructure development and industrialization. And this is what they say, it can work in your country too. They're not trying to sell communist propaganda. They say, this is what we have learned, how to get out of poverty. We believe that you can do that. This is what Xi Jinping told the African-China summit in 2015. He said, you are capable, completely capable of doing exactly what we did. You have to invest in these bottlenecks, the lack of credit, lack of skilled labor, and lack of infrastructure. If you solve these 3 things, you will become developed countries. So I think it's a revolutionary concept. It will overturn many of these terrible things which we have had in terms of geopolitical competition, which gave us world wars, and we had all these wars in these past years. It could be replaced by this idea of working together for the benefit of each other. I think this is a perfect application of the Peace of Westphalia and the UN Charter. So, and it will launch the whole world into a completely new economic dimension. I listened to your discussion about the moon. Why China wants to be in the moon? I mean, because we are not bound to this planet.
Right.
We have the whole universe. Many people say, "Oh, we have only this planet." Not true. Just look outside your window.
Yeah, you're right.
We have more planets.
And this is where it will be. It will make more sense that the BRI it's more than just geopolitical. It's a geo-economic incentive that the whole world can benefit from if they are subscribing.
Almost impact everyone.
Yeah.
Right.
That's for sure. So, any more questions, Ross? Before we we took enough time of Hussein here.
Hussein, this has been a remarkable conversation with you. We can't thank you enough.
Yeah. So, Hussein, if our viewers wants to learn more about you, where can they go?
Well, the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden. If you try to search for that, Belt and Road Institute in Sweden, on whether Google, YouTube, or Twitter, you will find us. Also, the Schiller Institute.
Okay.
Schiller, like the German poet Friedrich Schiller, SCHILLER Institute. Then you will find me too there.
Exactly. Well, we will have a link to your stuff on our descriptions when we do our.
Thank you very much.
Well, we can't thank you enough, Hussein. We truly appreciate you carving out time for us. Your insights and perspective about the BRI truly exemplify this misunderstanding for so many around the world. I hope, I'm sure our viewers will be very, very glad that they got a chance to listen to your insights. And we're certainly going to have you again in our show. So we hope you'll be here again once we reach out to you. So on behalf of our team as Geopolitics in Conflict show, we want to thank you so much for sharing your information with us. To our viewers, if you have not subscribed already, please do so. And as always, we thank you for your support. And as we always say, Ross, to our viewers, you stay informed. So once again, thank you all and see you next time. Bye-bye.